Have you ever found money on your pants after laundry? You know the joy that brings, like, oh, I didn't know that I had that. I feel like the Lord's Prayer is kind of like that for me. It's like finding money in my pants that I didn't know were there. And why do I say that? I say that because I think everybody's very familiar with the Lord's Prayer or being exposed to it at some point in time. But it's not until some time has passed, at least for me, and you look a little bit deeper into it, and you realize that there might be more there than you first think. And so, hi everyone. I'm Dan. I hope to talk to you for a couple of minutes, and then hopefully we can have a conversation as well about this whole philosophy that actually is built into this prayer that many of us have heard before, and that some of us have even memorized, but that oftentimes is said just as a matter of fact. But I think it's so deep and so profound that it really warrants a bigger exploration of what it means and what we are actually asking for. Because sometimes I'm not quite sure that we know what we're asking for. We think we're asking for something, but we are asking for a whole lot more. And if that's okay with you, we'll spend some time doing that. I think that we can spend months talking about this, but we're going to make it as palatable as possible because it is a summer day. And Chicago in the summer is beautiful. And I know that you are truly to be commended for being here today as opposed to enjoying the beautiful weather out there. Does that work with you? Okay. So when we say the Lord's Prayer, which sometimes is also known as Our Father, or sometimes as Pater Nostrum, which is the Latin name, what we really mean here by Lord is this is Jesus' prayer. Right? When Jesus was asked by one of his disciples, Lord, teach us how to pray, just like John taught his disciples how to pray in one version, he came out with this. And so we want to talk a little bit about it because it shows up twice in the New Testament. It shows up in Luke chapter 11, and it shows up in Matthew. So it shows up only in two of the four Gospels that we find in the New Testament. But what I think is really interesting is that it's really short. If you think about it, there's a bunch of verses in the New Testament in the Bible. But look at it. Luke and Matthew, like in Luke, it's really like 3 verses. It's verse 2, 3, and 4. It's very condensed. And if that's okay with you, I'm going to use Luke's version today. Just because I like it better. Just a fact. And then kind of look into this piece to see what are we actually asking for, because like everything else that JC, as I like to call him, as he probably would have been known in this day and age, not JZ, that's a different person. I'm talking about JC, Jesus Christ. He was able to condense so much wisdom into so few lines that to this day, every time I look at it, I find something new, just like that $20 bill in your pants after laundry, which in my case more like $5 bills. But I figure since you all live in Chicago, it must be $20 bills for you guys. But poor old me in California, sticking with the onesies and the fives. Is that okay? And so I hope that we do that. And the way I want to do this is just break down the verses, right? So we can kind of see here what is it that we have, and I want to go through it as we normally see, and then we're going to try to break it down a little bit and see how can we understand from our perspective this proposal, this whole philosophy on how to live and how to behave and how to see the world, right? So it starts with Our Father. And by the way, I should also say I am a sucker for the the King James version of the Bible, so it has older language. I just feel like more Shakespearean and fancy for some reason. It speaks to my heart. It doesn't have to be that for you. But since I was doing this and you had no choice, again, I chose what I liked, right? Which are, right? We just, old language saying which aren't. So, our Father who is in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, your kingdom come. Thy will be done, as in heaven, so in earth. Give us day by day our daily bread, and forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone that is indebted to us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Right? So what I want, hopefully, to do with you is simple. I would love to do here an exercise of math. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So there's really 7 sentences here. So we're just going to look at 7 different sentences within these 3 verses and break them down a little bit and see if there are things that we can really think about, and maybe something new will come to us that we may have not thought of before when uttering these beautiful poetic words, right? I think I should also say that we also might want to talk about prayer first before we dive into this prayer, right? Because in a way, when we are saying, I am going to pray, or teach me how to pray, we are really seeing, as we can kind of surmise here, is that we are trying to connect with the spiritual. We are trying to connect with God. So this is not just a way to say some words that have magical power, because there's no such thing. This is a description of a whole philosophy on how to connect with God, the universe, spirituality, the cosmos, nature, whatever the word is for you. How to connect to something greater, because that's what prayer is. It's connecting with God, with everything. And if the word God troubles you, then change it to something else. Right? I know that oftentimes we bring some baggage from our previous experiences with organized religion, and sometimes it's hard for us to let go of those perspectives because people may have treated us in a way that we perhaps didn't find all that pleasing, and we associate words and religion in general with that. But we want to break away with that, because this is an individual conversation between you and God, because that's what religion really is. The rest is organized religion, right? What we care about is your connection with God, and that's yours. What we do together is not as nice, because every time there's people in the middle, right, it becomes difficult. It also can be very great once we learn to tolerate and collaborate and all that kind of stuff. But are you with me so far? Does that make sense? All right, so 7 sentences for us to take a look at. 7 different things, more than 7 actually, but we're going to limit them a little bit because we can stay for a very long time talking about this. But I want to say that we begin in a very interesting way. How do we begin? Our Father. It's amazing for me when I look at it that Jesus chooses to begin the connection with the divine with these 2 words. And why do I say that? Because the very first word, it's a communal word, it's a plural word. It is not my Father. It is not your Father. It is our Father. And that's such a powerful message to say that our connection with God has to start with the acknowledgement that we're not the only thing in the universe. That when we are asking, when we are connecting with God, we must acknowledge that there is a whole lot of us. That we are not asking just for ourselves, that we must think of everybody else under the skies. And can I be honest with you? That's really hard. Because ultimately, I think we can agree the world out there is full of people who are just after what they want. And truth be told, they probably can say the same thing about us, because it's true. At our level of evolution, we're still just thinking about me, me, me. Give me right now if possible, and a lot, right? And if you have to, take it away from somebody else, because it's for me. And since I am the brightest spot in the universe, me right now, me, and also look at me, right? Because we still are in this phase of spiritual infancy. We're still spiritual children. And what do children do? They cry and they throw tantrums to get attention, because they need some love and some attention. And that's what we do as grown-ups, but we like to think otherwise, right? But anyways, I think it's really beautiful that Jesus is teaching us, if you really want to connect with the universe, if you want to connect with God, you must understand that everything else is not just here for you. That's kind of hard. That's like, it's sort of like a spiritual slap in the face, but a polite one. It's like, oh, I want to connect with God. I want to ask for things for myself. Not just for yourself. Sure, you deserve things and you are entitled to things, but it's about the whole. And so I find it really interesting, because it should invite us to change our perception and our perspective of things. We need to think about things from a higher perspective and understand that those near us are part of this universe and deserve attention as well, and that we must learn how to play nice and interact with them. Are you with me so far? Nothing earth-shattering, but pretty cool if you think that he decided to lead with that. So the second word is also an interesting word, Father. Obviously, we also have to take into consideration the context of the time. And it was an even more patriarchal society in many ways than the one we have today. So the head of the family, the head of society, was the father, the man. So at the same time that Jesus is saying there's a community of people here with he's saying that God, who we are addressing, is the top of the food chain. Right? But clearly, we can't interpret it that God is male. Or can we? We can't, because God is not physical. But for that day and age, authority came in the male figure. So we're talking here that the top of the food chain, rarely in old times, was a woman, which is unfortunate. We still have that problem today. I think we can understand that. So when you read this, I read nothing more into that, into Jesus trying to make his words adequate to the time so that we could understand. But what he means is that there's authority. But what's also important here, I feel, is that he's not telling us things too. Because sometimes it's more important to say what he didn't say than what he said. Why did he choose Father? Why doesn't he choose Supreme Commander, General? Because he also wants to send a message from the beginning that God is a God of tenderness and love, which was a radical departure from the precepts and the ideas of the time. If you read the Old Testament, you see a vengeful God, one that punishes people and hurts people. The perspective. To this day, we have this very unfortunate expression, we are God-fearing people. And I ask myself, why would I fear God? Because we still think of God in earthly terms, because he's so far away from us that we have trouble understanding this abstract concept. So we think that God must have the same desires that we do, because we're human and our desire is to command and tell other people what to do, right? At the end of the day, wouldn't the world be a better place if everybody just did what we thought was best. It will be better for us, but it will go against our. Are you with me so far? So I want to highlight that this is a shift towards love. It's a very important one. It's saying that God cares for us and loves us, and that's how he leads the entire thing. He starts with, we share the same familial tree. We're all siblings. We're together in this, and we're loved. If nothing else, that's the one thing we need to remember. At all times, we always have a family, and we are always loved. I think it's beautiful. 2 words, he does that. Right? And before you fall asleep, let's move on. Because what comes next during the sentence is pretty cool too, which are in heaven. What is heaven? Is it a place? Where is heaven? It's a good question. Maybe if you ask a kid, he'll say, oh, or she will say, up there. Right? But what does it mean to be up there? I mean, the earth is round. If you point up there here, but those in China point up there the other way, then if you think about it, we're really pointing in different directions. But we all understand the word heaven. I find that this is Christ's way of saying, the God that we are talking about is not of this world. You cannot use your frame of mind to understand God the way you try to understand other people, because God is not a person. God is. And that is like mind-blowing, because it's really, how do you understand something that you cannot understand? And he's politely saying, you can't understand God yet, but that's okay. Just know that God is not what you think or we have thought that God is until now. Because God is a God of love. It's a God of caring in all of us, which for us seems a little bit more obvious today, but 2,000 years ago might not have been the case for everybody. We even have the expression, God is love, nowadays. I'm not sure that expression was widely used 2,000 years ago. Right? So Jesus is placing God in a different frame of reference, saying, don't you try to put God into your human perspective and understanding, because it's not going to stick, because that's not where he is. Don't look for God being manifested through the daily acts of earth. Don't use your earthly mindset to try to make sure that you understand God. It's poetic and it's tricky at the same time, because he's also not placing God far away from us, because he just told us that God was our Father. So he's saying it's abstract. It's difficult for us to understand. The important thing for now is that you understand that God is a one of love. It's not a vengeful one. And that is hard for you to understand, but that God's place is somewhere else. The challenges that we see in this world is not really where God dwells. It's not really where God wants to be. Right? Okay. With me so far? I promise you, it will get boring. Don't worry. Okay, so that's the first sentence. It's a beautiful sentence already. Talk about an intro. Much better than my, have you ever found $20 in your pants? Clearly he knows what he's doing. Obviously I don't know what I'm doing. But I think it's a really profound and beautiful place when you stop to unpack it for a little bit. Right? What's next? I find this is an interesting one too. Hallowed be thy name. So what do we have here? We have name. And we have hallowed. So sacred be your name. This is an interesting one, because I think, again, that he is trying to tell us important things that might not be the ones that we think. it's not about a name, I think. It's not whether it's God or Yova or Yov or Jehovah. It's about identity. What is a name? A name is the identity of somebody else for us. I know that you are Lino. That's what I call who you are. But you are not the words Lino. That doesn't encompass you. But that's how I recognize you. That's how I know that you exist in my reality. And that's how I call on you, by using your name. So the idea of you is symbolized by a name. I think of that name, I think of you. Today you are Martha, tomorrow maybe you're John. The name itself, it's not that important, but the idea that the name represents, because remember, it's a very abstract thing. So, sacred be your idea. Sacred or important be all that you are. And let's make the act of calling on you, calling on that identity or seeking that identity, an important and noble process. Are you with me? Isn't that cool? He's saying that the act of looking for God or calling on God or trying to understand God is a very sacred one. It's a very important one. Even though it's abstract, we should never stop trying to understand it. We may not have the ability to fully comprehend it today, but we keep growing every time we try, and so we should keep going. So I feel that in here, there is a built-in process of saying, continue to pursue the understanding of what God is. And that is a very important thing that you must do on your own. You can do it. It can be a teamwork. But it's for you. So continue to do that. And we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. Yeah? And then here's where it gets interesting. I think interesting everywhere, but clearly I am biased. The next one is, thy kingdom come, your kingdom come. And again, Jesus is using words that jump at us. Because back in the day, to this day, every time you hear kingdom, you're like, ooh, that's kind of special. Ooh, a queen, a king, power, riches. That's what comes to our mind. You know, the queen, ooh, right? He is saying, that's an important word, but what is a kingdom? It's a realm, it's a place, it's a reality. And so he's saying, you are the ultimate ruler of this kingdom and reality that you have. And whose reality is it? Your reality, God's reality, not our reality. So we're asking, God, bring this reality, your reality, because you know better, because you care for us and you are a father, you understand things better. Bring your reality to us. It's not about make my reality better. It's a fundamental shift, right? Because we ask for that. We say, can you just make my life better? I really need this. Can you help me get this job, or land that deal, or maybe land that person? Right? We're asking for us, but he's leading with, no. Your ruling, your things, the things that you have set up are better, and we want you to bring that to us. Right? And he goes on, just to make sure that we don't confuse physical things. He says, thy will be done, your will be done. And again, who is this about? Not us. Whose will is it? God's. Right? Whose kingdom is it? gods. Until now, there's a lot about God. There's not a lot about us. Isn't that interesting? Right? And what is the will? The will is the desire. It's the driving force. It's that thing that moves you forward. So don't just give us comfort in our reality, but also help us understand why things are the way they are. Why are they driven this way? Why do they happen this way? Are you with me? Poetic. But he's saying, your kingdom come, bring your reality, which obviously must be a much better reality than our own, because we have already established that God is kind of cool and a little bit more than us. So bring that to us. But just don't bring us the comfort. Also help us understand and make your way of thinking prevail. Because it's not just about having things or being in comfort, being in a kingdom, but it's about setting things in motion, understanding how to keep that going. That's also important. And here's a fantastic piece that I think is really powerful as well. Where will his will be done? In heaven. As in heaven, so in earth. So what we're asking is, make earth more like heaven. I think this is a fundamental shift from the way we think. I think that when we start to learn a little bit about religion, we think about, oh, if I behave, I'm going to go to heaven. And I'm going to get out of here. Bye, suckers. Right? You guys stay with everything else here. I'm going to graduate. And when we learn about Spiritism as well, when we understand that there's different realms and different spiritual worlds, many of us, the first thing we want to, I want to graduate. I want to work my way out and move somewhere nicer. Because I don't like all of you. Because we're still thinking with our not with our brain. Right? But here, as in heaven, so in earth, we are making a commitment and saying, we want you to bring heaven to earth. As a matter of fact, we're signing up to be part of that because we're asking for it. So we're basically committing, we are going to be part of the process of making this joint a classier one. We are going to make earth a better one. We want you to bring all these things so that we can have everything that's over there over here. So it's not about escaping this reality. It's not about going to a different reality. It's about making this reality a better one for all of us. And we're committing to it because we're asking for it. We can't just ask and sit and wait. When we ask, we're saying, I want that, so I'm going to help you. I'm going to help out. So that's one of those moments when I think that we don't realize what we're asking for when we are praying the Lord's Prayer. We're saying, sign me up. I'm going to help that take place. And here's a cool thing, I think. Then there's a shift. We're talking about God, and now it starts about, all right, we begin to understand the big picture and what God is. Let's talk about our daily lives. Let's come down to the practical. Where do we go next? Give us day by day our daily bread. Give who? Us. It's not give me. Right? Just in case we forgot about that, because we need many reminders about that, I feel like. And Jesus knew it. Right? And he says, gives us our daily bread. And what is our daily bread? I think the first place we think of is our physical bodies. We say, give me food. Yes. And we have just established that God's reality is something abstract. It's something beyond the physical. And so, if we are working on bringing heaven to earth, give us our sustenance. Give us our strength. Give us, yes, our food. Give everything that we need. And what is bread? Bread was the basic building block of life. Like, what would you eat back in the days? Lasagna? Not exactly. Could you go to a 7-Eleven and pick up some food? Back in Galilee times? Probably not. Was there Uber Eats for delivery? No. Right? There weren't that many food choices, and bread was a staple of it. So give me what is most necessary, what is most fundamental, so that we can work on all of this. Are you with me? So we're asking for the strength to make all of that possible, both physical, but also emotional and spiritual. Because oftentimes we get caught in the comfort and our will kind of sputters a little bit. Give us the strength. And here's what I find is really interesting. Give us when? All at once? Day by day. Why not just give us a bunch of it? Why not just give us a bunch of it and then we have it stockpiled? Then we don't have to get it every day. It will be so more efficient, right? Why? Why day by day? Why every day? Why give me my daily bread? And he says daily bread, not bread, right? Give me my daily bread from every day. Maybe because he knows us. And he knows that if we got a lot of something, we sit on it. And we say, I'm done. I don't need to move. I don't need to work. I have a bunch of stuff here. As a matter of fact, I have so much bread here that if I go do anything else, maybe somebody will come and steal my bread. And then we start worrying about the physical world more than we really ought to. So I feel like what we are getting here is a certainty that we are going to have enough every single day to go through the things that we need to go through in this life to help establish the kingdom of God, which is happiness, whatever it is that you want to call it, on this earth. Now, there's an us here, too. So us, we collectively are going to have enough. Some of us may not have enough on a daily basis, but all of us have enough on a daily basis. So, if it is as in heaven, so in earth, it's also our duty to think of what? The earth. And think about it how? Every day. Wow. It's our duty not to just stockpile things and make sure that we have enough day by day to do that which we need to do, which is our job of bringing heaven into earth. And that includes the fact that we are a community because it's our Father, so you need to make sure that all of us have enough. That's how I read it. And here what becomes really cool in many different ways. The next one is very powerful. And forgive us our sins. Ooh, the S word. Forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone that's indebted to us. So I want to highlight the word sin, which is in brown there. Maybe you can't see very well right there. But sin is a very powerful word, I feel, for me, because it's so loaded emotionally. It feels like the 7 deadly sins. It's like they seem so outrageous and dramatic and so eternal that once you have sinned, you are forever damned. But I find it interesting that the next part here says indebted, and I also want to highlight the debt part there. And he is making a comparison here, right? And he's saying, and forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone that is indebted to us. That is to say, forgive us our debts, as we must forgive, or because we have to forgive the debt of others, because we are learning to live in that communal space. We're learning to live in the our peace. So, what is to forgive? To forgive is sort of to let go. So, help us let go of our debts. How do you let go of a debt? Do you just declare bankruptcy? and never deal with it again? No, that's escape from that, right? But to really fulfill a debt, you pay it. So help us pay our debts. That is, help us recover all the errors and mistakes and shortcomings that we have done, built, or have become, as we also learn how to do that with others, because it's about us. And I read here a very interesting piece, because these debts that we have are not from one life. We even have the discussion in the Bible when people say, oh, this man was blind. Was it his parents that have sinned? So do you inherit the sins, the debts and mistakes from your parents? That doesn't sound fair, right? And Jesus says no. And then they are puzzled, because how could someone be born blind if they haven't done anything in this life to deserve that? And so Jesus sends them for a loop, and thinking about that, because it says you don't inherit the sins of your fathers. So how can we have different starting points? For me, this also is better understood with the idea of reincarnation, because some of our debts are large, that it takes multiple installments to pay. But that's okay, because to the extent that we start to pay them, we also understand that there are others who have also debts to pay. And then we start thinking, oh my God, it's not personal maybe, or it's not as personal. The trespasses of others against me, it's not necessarily just because I am the only person in the universe and everybody's against me. It's because they were trying to be happy, and they didn't realize, much the way I don't realize sometimes, that I stepped on other people's foot when I'm trying to get to X. And it becomes easier for us to forgive others, well, what they have done to us, when we understand that we have done the same, or perhaps worse. We become a lot more tolerant and a lot less cynical. Because every time that we criticize someone, we're really saying, indirectly, that we're better than them. It means that we would never have made that mistake. Can we really say that? Probably not. It feels good in the moment, because we're so small still, and that's okay, because we're growing, that we feel like if we put other people down, we will feel better, because we haven't understood the our part yet. But when we understood the family piece, then we understand that when people are doing that, when they're trying to put us down, is really a reflection of where they are. So it shouldn't bother us as much, because it's not about us. It's about them. It's only about us if we accept that it is about us. And then it is about us because guess what? We made it about us. There's a beautiful story, I think, in the Eastern tradition that I like very much, that it's about the Buddha. And the story goes that the Buddha was talking to many people who came to him, and many of the soldiers at the time would come to him, talk to him, and decide not to go fight wars anymore, not be soldiers anymore. So it gets to a point that a general starts noticing that he's losing many of his soldiers. And he's losing many of his soldiers because they're going to talk to this Buddha guy. So he decides to take up matters into his own hands, and he goes talk to the Buddha. He goes over there, and he just chews the Buddha off in public. Right? How dare you do this? Who do you think you are? Why are you taking the soldiers away? And he's pretty strong. And so does the story goes that the Buddha stops, looks at him and says, General, when somebody offers you a gift and you refuse it, who does the gift belong to? And in that moment, the story goes that the general understood that all his rage and all his frustration had been basically refused, and that he now had to deal with it, and he walks away without saying a word in shame. I think it's a beautiful story for us, because sometimes we give situations more power over us than we really should. Yes, We have debts. Yes, we have sinned, but nothing is irrevocable. Nothing cannot be, with time, fixed. It will take time. Because it says, forgive us our sins, for we also forgive everyone that's indebted to us. So we get to be forgiven, and we forgive others. And others are forgiven by also forgiving others. So everything, all our debts, can be dealt with. No matter how big it's a pretty big message. No matter how big it is, because sin is a pretty big word, right? So no matter how deep and bad things are, or acts have been committed against you, or you have done that to other people, in time and with work, it might not happen quickly. It might take a lot longer to untangle the mess that we create than it took to create it, but it is recoverable, even if not in this lifetime. So it requires work, though, forgiveness. It just doesn't happen. The F word, it's a pretty big one. Because we also have sometimes, maybe it's time for a different conversation, the idea that forgiveness is just like, oh yeah, you either have it or you don't have it. No, you work at it. You work at forgiving. You might want to keep your distance for a little bit. That's okay when somebody hurts you. Then later you start to at least send them good thoughts. You don't need to see them, but eventually you need to face that. And you need to let that go. Because guess who's carrying the weight of being hurt? You are. So when you forgive, you let go of that backpack of weight that is attaching you to a situation that you don't like to begin with. When somebody has hurt you and you are living that over and over again, you are literally doing the thing that you don't want, which is remind yourself of a situation that you didn't like to begin with. So why would you want to continue to relive a past that's only hurting you? I'm not saying stash it away deep down in your feelings and don't deal with it. I'm not talking about mental memory, right? Losing your memory. I'm saying process it and realize that when people hurt you, oftentimes it's not a reflection of what you've done. Many times it's what they've done. And let that go. Because it only holds you back. So let's move forward to the extent that we can start to process our things and work towards them. Because that's how everybody else does. Whether they have sinned against us or against their brothers. The process of moving forward is processing the things that we have done or had done unto us, working it out, and moving on. Very tough stuff. So that's why it comes kind of at the end. You gotta, and by the way, you gotta do that. And here's the really great part, I think, too. It's a nice reminder at the end. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Very dramatic again, right? But lead us not into temptation. What is temptation? Temptation is that thing that we might fall prey on, that we want to do. Because the only way you fall into temptation is because you want to do that, right? And what are the things that we want to do, oftentimes, that are temptations to us? There are things that probably wouldn't be good for us. So we're saying, please help us as we start to develop spiritually and understand things. Help us not fall back into our old ways, because it will happen. He's telling us how to do everything else, and he's saying, by the way, every once in a while, we're going to slide. Help us not do that. Help us not be pulled back to the old version of ourselves. Because that will deliver us from evil. So what is evil? Evil is us going back to our less divine side. It's not external. Evil is us playing against our better selves. Evil is us falling prey to temptation. I know it's a lot easier for us to blame the outside world and say, and many people do this to my amazement, say, I was tempted and it was somebody else's fault. We see that all the time. We have this historical dialogues of people saying they were tempted to cheat and the devil made me do it. That's the greatest cop-out ever. So the good parts are you do it, but the bad parts somebody else. Got it. When do we get to own everything we do? The good and the bad. When? Because I see a lot of folks, myself included, blaming other people sometimes for things, for outcomes that I didn't like. Yes, it may have been influenced by other people, but it's my outcome. I was involved. There is a reason for things. So let's take ownership of everything that we do and not go back to things. So, then I'm glad you're almost done, because there's a lot to be unpacked there we can go deeper into, right? But what we were talking here, if my clicker were to work, it does work, look at that. Sometimes it does work, sometimes it doesn't. Temptation, okay, now I decided to work. All right, so there's a whole philosophy here of many different things, but I also point out, again, the way that it's laid out, which I think is really interesting, right? So what is the first line about? And we talked briefly about this. Oh, let's see if we can go back more. Oh, no, pressing the wrong button then. So the first line is about, who is the line about? It's about God, right? You agree with me? It's about who God is. It's the definition of God, sort of. Right? What's the second line? What is it about again? It's about God again. What's the third line about? It's about God again. Whose kingdom is it that we're talking about? God's. Who are we talking about until now? God. What's the fourth one? It's God too. And you can tell because I put the blue here, right? Because that's how you know. Just kidding. But it's about God's will. Right now, the beginning, the first sentences, what are they about? They are about God. And then there's a shift. What's the fifth one about? Give whom? Us. So who is it about now? It stops being about God and it's like us. And then what's the next one about? Us. And what's the last one about? Us. So I think it's interesting that we have 4 sentences about God and 3 about us. I take that to mean that the way for us to truly understand and connect with spirituality is we have to lead with our understanding of God. If we don't think about the spiritual first, it will be hard for us to make sense of the world that we live in. Am I saying that we need to go to the mountaintops and not deal with the physical world? Not at all. But we need to focus our efforts and minds and our spiritual side first. Because once we understand our spiritual side, then we can work on what's happening right now. Because I can tell you the opposite's not true. Because there's a lot of people who have their physical side figured out, but are not feeling fulfilled. And we can see that in our society in general in 2 ways, I think. One is in the very large suicide rates that we're having. Never have we been so comfortable in the history of humanity, have so many things, right? We don't need to go hunting anymore. We can go to the hunting to the fridge, right? We can take 3 steps and go there while we're watching Netflix on our phones. So we have never had so much comfort. Yet, never have we had so many people, comparatively speaking, taking their own lives because they don't see meaning in what they're doing. So that's a problem. We can also see that through the rich and famous, who are not exactly better shape than us emotionally or psychologically. And they have everything that's material that many of us want. Fame, beautiful bodies, recognition and adoration, and yet they also fall prey to suicide and also struggle with meaning in their lives. And I think there's a different way for us to look at it too. I don't know about you, but a lot of people that I talk to, they're all thinking about a change of sorts. They know that something is missing in their lives. They have everything. They have a job, they have a career. They might not be ultra rich, but they have comfortable lives, and they're debating, should I really be doing this? What should I be doing with my life? It is that spiritual awakening in us saying, there's something from our reality that's missing, and we can't quite pinpoint it. When that's the reason why, because we're starting with the us part, the physical part. And we're not getting to this. In fact, when we think with our physical brains as opposed to our spiritual minds, we oftentimes say, I don't have time for this right now because I got to pay the mortgage. But when I retire and I have all the time in the world, when I do this, then I will get to this. And then something happens and you don't, because something will always happen. So the mental proposition here that Jesus makes to us is, no, flip your thinking. Flip your mindset. It's not about you getting figured out in the physical world, then looking for the spiritual. It's about you understanding the spiritual, because once you do, you'll be okay with the physical, no matter how bad the physical is. Because you're going to be happy in understanding why you're doing the things you're doing, even if they're not working out great, because you have the long view, and your long view is what? Making the kingdom come, and things, understanding how things work, where? Here. That's our mission. Interesting, because what's not here is, God, make me happy. Right? Did you see that? It's a byproduct, right? It's implicit. When we do all of this, the outcome is happiness. Happiness. Because you can't be happy in the middle of the worst place ever. With the worst people that you can think of. And you can be very unhappy in the best place ever. So it's not about physical, it's not about geographic location, right? It's about mental location. It's about mental geography. And about conscience. Can we put our consciousness to play? Can we put our conscience at ease by doing the things that we know we have to do? Because we know what we have to do. We might be tempted not to listen to that, but we know it's built into us. We learn that in Spiritism, that's one thing that God gives us is our conscience. And that is where the laws are inscribed. We might try to baffle that a little bit, but we know in our minds when we stop to listen, what do we have to do? Doing that is really hard, though. So when we're signing up for all of this, what are we signing up for? Right? What are we really signing up for? We're saying, I'm signing up. What I'm asking when I pray the Lord's Prayer is, I am asking that I understand that this is a team sport in many ways, that I'm an individual in that, but there is a whole community around this. And I cannot ignore that there are people outside of my reality. That I am special, but so is everyone else. The problem is that we want to be special over people. We want to think that we're better than others, as opposed to understanding that each one of us is a universe of itself, and there's beauty in each one of us if we know how to look. But we're all different. Right? All of us can be the brightest spot in the universe. Because if the universe is infinite, then there's equal distance to any side of any spot. Pick a spot in the universe, and you can say it's the center, because if it goes on forever, the center is what? A place where there's equal distance from everywhere else. So we can all be centers of the universe at the same time, physically speaking. I should say physics speaking, right? Anyways, we're asking for our understanding that God is one of love and knowledge, but for all of us. And that whatever it is that we ask for, we should have the common interest at heart too, not just ours. It's okay to ask for us, but let's make sure that doesn't rub against the rights or the goodwill or the needs of others. And also understand that what we're asking for is the heaven peace. It's not physical things. We shouldn't really necessarily just ask for success in this physical life because it's temporary. This is one of many. It's like going to work during the year. Every day you put on different clothes and you go to work. Hopefully they're different clothes. Hopefully you've washed them. Always a good advice. But you get my point. Next day you might be wearing different clothes, but still you going to work. That's sort of our spiritual life. We reincarnate with different clothes to continue to do that work until we have paid our debt. And then we feel happy about things. Let's make that pursuit of divinity, God, spirituality, a special and noble endeavor in our lives. Let's continue to try to understand what God is, because once we understand what God is, then it changes our behavior. Because if God is the God of everyone, then I cannot treat people differently because of who they are. That's a fundamental change. If I truly believe that God is the God of everyone, then I cannot discriminate. I can't, because it's our Father. It's not Father of Christians, Father of white people, Father of straight people, Father of insert whatever you want here. Able-minded or, right, physically able people. That's not what we're saying. There's no caveats here. It's all inclusive. So why is it that we still get stuck in differentiating people when we're clearly told the first thing we must not do is separate them? But we do it. If we truly believe in God, if we say we believe in God and really are about what we say, there can be no difference in the treatment of people, period. You can treat them differently based on your experience with them and if they hurt or not, but you can't necessarily treat them differently off the bat. Because there's a commitment we're making. Everybody is a child of God. And so am I. And that pursuit of God is sacred. We should always do that. Because what we really want to do is, once we learn from that, we want to make it this reality, this other reality that we know exists, that is grander and more beautiful than ours. We want it to bring it down to our level, and we want to understand how that's done and work towards it so that we can make this place just like the one up there. And we want strength to do this, all of us, on a daily basis. So please help us on a daily basis. Give us enough so that we can keep moving forward, but not too much that we get too comfortable when we don't move forward. Because we are going to sometimes slide. So give us enough to keep us going, whether it's sustenance or whether it's hardship. Give us enough so that we continue to work on ourselves, because we recognize that we need to work on ourselves by forgiving others and forgiving ourselves too. Because we oftentimes hold ourselves back. We feel guilty and we feel we're not deserving. Help us work that out too, because all of us are children of God. No one is better than anybody else, no matter what they tell you. They're only better than you if you let yourself believe that. And please, in the middle of all this, help us not fall back into our ways, because we know that change is hard and it will happen. And that's okay. We might slide back, but help us continue to work on our lifetimes so that our physical part can match the spiritual piece. Help us make the spiritual piece and the physical piece the same. Help us think of all of them as one thing and not as separate things. Help us wake up every day and consider that I'm here on this earth to become a better human being and therefore happier, because we are happy when we do the things that we know we want to do, and we're proud of the things that we have achieved when they're good ones. Right? But also remind me that I have a responsibility towards others, because they also have a responsibility towards me. We watch each other's back. We are our brothers and sisters' keepers. So this is a philosophy that is far bigger than just asking for health and happiness for ourselves. It's about inviting us to step out of our comfort zone and realizing that there are other people in the universe, that we are part of a much larger constellation of things, and that by realizing the spiritual into the physical, our challenges go away, and a rising tide lifts all boats. That's a beautiful thing. And so I honestly think that once we think about it that way with our spiritual eyes first, what Spiritism really helps us do, because it starts to remind us on a daily or weekly basis that the spiritual realm exists, that this heaven that we're talking about, that spirituality is real. And why do I say that? Because Spiritism is uniquely adapted and adept at understanding how the spiritual world communicates with the physical world, that they're not apart. They overlap, they're one and the same. So for us Spiritists, on a weekly basis often, we have contact with the spirit world, and we hear from people who lived here and say, oh my goodness, I wish I had thought more about my spiritual self, because now I find myself in this situation that is not really great for me. We hear that firsthand. We also hear the opposite and say, I didn't live or lead a life which many perceive to be a glamorous or glorious one in this world, but because I did the things that I needed to do, I feel so incredibly well in the spiritual reality. We have these confirmations that Jesus and the disciples had back in the day, but that through time we have lost a little bit of, because we have so institutionalized the way we think about religion that we have lost the individual component of things. And this is, I think, the gift that Spiritism brings back to us, is the proof positive that the spirit world exists and that is there, that it interacts with us. And that's not hocus pocus. And it's not a mystical thing. It's not the benefit of a few. It's for everybody, because God does not choose favorites. There cannot be chosen few. It's a figure of speech. There are those who are self-selecting, because if God is Father and Mother and more than that, right? Because God's not human, so it's got to be even more than that. How can you choose one kid over another? If parents don't do that, then why would God, which is infinitely better than that we don't even understand, would do that? Why do we think that certain groups of people are better than others? Question for the ages. It has been happening for the ages, and it must change. These are the times that it must change. We must be more tolerant with others, and we must learn how to go through this process of spiritualizing ourselves, so to speak, without losing the sight that we live a physical life, and we need to make change here. The change in the living that we do, the ethical behavior that we apply, they're not for the hereafter, they're for the here and now. Because we need to change things. And I think for that purpose, I think when we say the Lord's Prayer, actually what we really are saying is, it's our prayer. It's all about us. It's all for us. But it doesn't start with us. But it sure gives us ways in which we can make that happen, so that we can transform ourselves. So I think that's a fascinating idea for us to think about it. And I hope, my goal here is to maybe whet your appetite a tiny little bit, so the next time you are thinking about the Lord's Prayer or saying it, that you wrestle with it for a little bit. And you ask yourself the tough questions that we all must ask ourselves, not to punish ourselves or to put us on the spot, but to really constantly learn and go in God's direction. And I feel like that's why the Christ, which is our older brother, spiritually speaking, who is much farther ahead than us, came to tell us. His was a gospel of love, a gospel of kindness. What we, his followers, have done to it is a different story. But his acts, his actions, were one of love, of forgiveness, and tolerance. And of showing us that we can do amazing things just like he did. In fact, he also came to tell us that the spiritual reality was a reality when he resurrected. That is the amazing thing that nobody has done since he has. To show us that death is not the end of us. We just think of Christ on the cross crying in blood. I don't know why. His message was one of happiness. Why do we focus on that? He came back to show, hey, I died. No big deal. I'm back. Everything I've done, you will do too. You will also lose your physical body, but you are not going to be gone. Everyone will, and nobody will be gone. We just won't see for a little bit, but then we see them again. And we come back to this earth so as we must to continue to make this a better place. Did he need to come back? Did he need to be with us? Probably not. He could have been in a much nicer place. But he was back because he wanted to make this place just like heaven for all of us. Because he understood and lived this. Now it's up to us to do the same. It is a tall order, but it's doable. And it's much better as a group. So I hope that more and more you will have the will and the strength to do the things that you know that you must do. And that if you are struggling with it, remember that you can always start with God. Once you start with God and get your clarity there, the rest falls into place. So that's my invitation. That's my prayer as well. I thank you for your time.